Welcome to the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. My name is Julia Rothkopf, and I'm the Program Associate at YIVO. Today we have Marek Tushevitsky and Rachel Kafferson joining us for a discussion about A Frog Under the Tongue, Jewish folk medicine in Eastern Europe. And this book it just recently came out on paperback, and we are selling it in the YIVO store. For those who do not know YIVO, we are a very special place for the celebration, contemplation, and exploration of Yiddish and Eastern European Jewish life and culture. We are located in New York City, where our library and archive contain over 24 million documents and 400,000 books. These resources are used by researchers from all around the world. We also have lots of classes on Yiddish language and culture, where, by the way, Marek and Rachel both met for the first time in one of our Yiddish classes. We also have exhibitions and public programs just like this one, where we aim to bridge the worlds of Jewish culture and our vast library and archival collections. Marek Tushevitsky is the Ariel and Joshua Wiener Family Fellow at the Katz Center for Advanced Jewish Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Much of his research and teaching focuses on the language and culture of Ashkenaz, particularly in the relation towards modernity. In 2014, he received a PhD in history from the Jagiellonian University, and a year later published the book A Frog Under the Tongue, Jewish Folk Medicine in Eastern Europe. He has also authored numerous articles devoted to Ashkenazi popular medical culture, translations of Yiddish literature into Polish, including Mendele, Peretz, and Sutzkever, as well as his own book of Yiddish poetry, Vom Beta Zeiten Spiegel. And Rachel Kafferson is a journalist, teacher, playwright, and 2022 winner of the prestigious Adrian Cooper Dreaming in Yiddish Prize. Since 2017, her Rachel's Golden City column has appeared monthly in Tablet magazine, covering the length and breadth of Yiddish culture. In October 2023, she taught her first class for the Yiddish Book Center, Between Heaven and Earth, Yiddish Women's Folklore, Rituals, and Magic. Since then, her lectures and classes on everyday Ashkenazi magic become a favorite with students around the world. In September 2024, she will teach a new course she did teach a new course for the Yiddish Book Center called Sacred Time and Liminal Space, Ashkenazi Folk Magic at the Threshold. And now I will hand it over to Marek and Rachel.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia. I am kind of blown away to see how many people are here this afternoon and from all over the world. I don't think I've ever seen a crowd like this. It's pretty fantastic. So, wow. I mean, Mark's book is incredible, as I'm sure some of you already know, and Mark is an amazing, excuse me, scholar. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about this. And, I'm glad that I was asked to do this because Mark's book has really, been a constant companion for me in many ways because I've been teaching these classes about what I call everyday Ashkenazi magic. And I'm constantly citing the book and telling people to buy it, of course. I will say this about the book, which, the title, if you're not really thinking, you might think, okay, folk medicine, what is that? But I would say that it kind of creates or completes a trilogy of incredibly important books about Ashkenazi culture. So the trilogy starts with Joshua Trachtenberg's Jewish Magic and Superstition, which came out, I think, in 1938. And then we have this book right here, which is much less well known, but I think still amazing. It's Jewish Folkways in Dramatic Land, 1648 to 1806, by a gentleman named Herman Pollack, who nobody ever seems to talk about. But it's this incredible compendium of folkways and sort of the texture of folk culture. And what Mark's book does is that it really completes this trilogy by bringing us into sort of more of the modern period and really focusing on Poland and Eastern Europe, right? Trachtenberg is really thinking about, Germany, Germanic lands, as is Herman Pollack. And Mark is bringing us the really juicy Yiddish language folk culture. And if you thought, oh, folk medicine, I don't know, what's that? That's probably just, tea or putting mercury in everything or something. you're about to have your mind blown. It's a lot wilder than that. So I want to just start sort of with some basics to, get to know Mark a little bit. As Julia said, we met each other at the Evo Summer Program Refresher course in 2008. Little did I know. So, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to focus on Jewish history and Jewish folk culture, and then specifically talk a little bit about how you came to focus on healing and medicine. Did you have a medical or background or an interest in medicine? So, two related questions.
Yeah, sure. Hello, and hello, everyone. Nice to have such a large audience. Uh, Let me start with the history of short history or story about the institution where I come from. It's about 40 years already since the university in Krakow, together with the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, began a research project on Jewish autonomy in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, so mainly in between 16th and 18th century. And the leading person in this project was Professor Honesh Meruch, who was also a Yiddishist scholar in Yiddish literature. And he managed to convince Polish authorities, and it was still under communism, to put together a permanent team of historians on the topic of Jewish history in Poland. And the idea fell on the fragile ground also because of the political changes taking place in Poland at the time, and the restoration of full freedom of research a few years later. So this group of historians mutated into the institute where I work now, the Institute of Jewish Studies at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, the institute that produced already about 1,000 graduates. That includes also about 30 PhDs. And I'm one of them. I'm one of those graduates, and I've been working at the institute for 11 years. And my personal interest in medical culture of Eastern Ashkenaz began with the encountered when I encountered popular hagiographies of Hasidic leaders. As I studied figures such as Rebbe Chaim Halberstam from Sants, for example, my attention naturally turned to the role of healers that is ascribed to them. And of course, Hasidic tzaddikim enjoyed great authority among Jewish masses in the late 19th and in the 20th centuries. And we can see in the literary legacy and also in those studies of Fiedler that still remained in the archives of the Evo, for example, that health was one of those crucial issues with which people used to undertake this kind of pilgrimage to the Rebbe's court. And not only Jewish people, but the entire population of Eastern Europe really undertook such pilgrimages. Even in my wife's family, there are stories about their grandparents who, in the 1930s, before the Second World War, also had encounters with the tzaddik and were helped by the Rebbe of Belz because they came from Volhynia. But more than miracles, amulets, and anti-demonic rituals, I was interested in how those religious leaders negotiated their place between ancient and modern medical cultures. Because Hasidus developed at the same time, exactly at the same time as modern medicine. And this had some crucial consequences on how people reacted to those both phenomenons and how much authority was described to them when it comes to health and healing. And my interest intensified after I came upon a number of publications that came from Hasidic circles that included medical advice. And those were texts of various characters. Some of them were copies taken from older medical books or Kabbalistic books, like those books of practical Kabbalah of the 18th century. So some of those passages were simply taken from older traditions. Some other, however, resembled what I knew already from the ethnography of Eastern Europe, from from the ethnography of Slavic peoples or from Germanic lands. But there were also some passages that referred to modern doctors, and they were written in Hebrew script, but in Latin, and they provided full prescriptions of modern medicines. So I was impressed by the variety of advice, and this was exactly what inspired me to seek the reason why this material is so diverse, and how is it possible that it contains both pre-modern and very modern pieces of medical advice.
Okay, so I want to come back to this piece about Hasidism and healing and healers a little bit later because it's so interesting and it's so kind of vivid and compelling and interesting and sort of, I think, unexpected. Again, when you think, okay, healers, well, maybe, you have like your wise woman on the edge of town or whatever, you're not prepared for the role of the Rebbe, for example, or many different Rebbes or the variety of kinds of Rebbes, right? So we're going to come back to that in a little bit, and I just want to clarify. Mark mentioned that he found these collections of Kvitlich, and this was in the YIVO archive.
I believe that it was. Yes, and it's not exactly mine work. It was done by Professor Marcin Wodziński from the Wrocław University.
So I just want to clarify to the audience, if people don't know what a kvittel is, kvitlich is a plural. So a kvittel is like a note, a prayer petition that would be written and handed to, if you went to consult a Rebbe on something, you would hand it, well, maybe to their gabbai, or you would hand it to them. But also a kvittel could be laid at the grave of a Rebbe, right? So it was multi-purpose. And if you couldn't write your own, there were specialized people who could write them for you. So kvitlich, very, very important, a practice we still see today. Go to the Rebbe's oil in Queens, there's a blizzard of kvitlich, right, covering the graves there. All right, so I'm going to go on to my next question. We're going to come back to Hasidism in a little bit. You chose this image of a frog under the tongue as the title of your book, and it's so wonderfully evocative. And the title tells you this is no ordinary book about health and medicine. All right. And also, I just want to note that if you're very online or terminally online, like I am, you know that frogs are extremely zeitgeisty and memeable. I mean, just think of, Lahavdil, Pepe the frog, but also Toad and Frog. And, there's so many different kind of frogs all over the place. Of course, Kermit, the OG frog. But anyway, there was something that was both like the frog under the tongue captures something that's both kind of old-timey and also incredibly modern and zeitgeisty. So can you tell us exactly actually what it means and how frogs figure into the story of folk medicine?
Yeah, so it started with my interest in those medical texts, but the choice of title only happened when I was having a conversation with my colleagues from Warsaw, especially with Professor Joanna Nalewajko-Kulikow, who is a historian of 20th century, also historian of Yiddish press. And we were during the lunch break during a conference. We sat over pizza and discussed various things that I have found in my sources. And I told my colleagues about this disease that is called ranula in Latin, which means little frog, and which was known in Jewish sources as the frosh under the tzung or tzifardea tachat lashon. And this concept is also known in Polish and German sources because it has much older genealogy, dates back to the ancient medicine. And my colleague proposed to use this name for the title book because it is intriguing. It has so much connection with the topic, but it doesn't say anything at once. People sometimes think that it's about using frogs as a direct medicine that you should eat or put under your tongue, and this is not exactly the case. So the term ranula itself refers to a cyst that sometimes forms under the tongue and mouth, and is filled with saliva that has leaked from the gland, the damaged salivary gland. And such cysts usually it can grow. It can grow as large as a tennis ball, and looks cracked and slippery, so it resembles a frog. Um, and yeah, I think that the very name "frog under the tongue" is a great example how medical folklore was connected with this ancient medical knowledge or science, this early philosophy of the ancient era and later of the medieval and early modern times. However, it is not exactly clear what are really the origins, because with even old medicine drew a lot from simple observations, from similarities, to simple symbolics, and in the case of frog under the tongue, it seems so intuitive that it can emerge in various cultures without any connections or traditions. But it is very much possible that there was tradition, and I will show you why. So frogs also appear quite frequently in folklore studies when it comes to folk medicine, in the specific role of creatures that are capable of sucking various types of fluids of the body. They resemble sponges of things that are able to take the fluid from other body into itself, which is why they were placed, for example, on the head of people that suffered from headaches. Because people believed that headaches may be provoked by the excess of phlegm, one of those fluids existing in people's bodies, or one of the humors, and this phlegm was supposed to be created in brain, exactly. So there was various symptoms of this excess of phlegm, for example, sneezing, but also headaches. So the application of the frog may have consisted in bandaging the head with the frog together underneath the bandage and waiting it to die as a proof that it was effective. But I have also come across application of frogs in a processed form, for example, in the form of an ointment, which was actually made of frog, or a special stone that is called crapaudina, or also the little frog. And this stone is even more interesting because of the fact that its name was also popular in old English medical literature. It was translated as a toadstone or buffonite, because buffon is Latin toad as well. And it was supposed to be able to suck out venomous venoms from snake bites, or from when someone was bitten by a rabid dog, for example. So probably those stones were in fact teeth of a different species, of a fossil shark rather than a frog. They are black and very round. The texture is very smooth. So they are quite interesting as objects. But even in the 17th century in Europe, this European medicine believed that they are acquired from toads, that you have to go into the forest or into the swamps in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the night, find an old toad, and take those stones out of the toad's head. And I have accounted one story or a case. It was a court case of a Jewish healer and non-professional practitioner who used this kind of Crapaudina stone to heal people that were bitten by a dog or a snake. And this stone, it was not his exactly. He borrowed it from a Christian peasant who acquired it from a trader that brought it from Rome. So there was another this sacral element to this story. So yeah, when you think about ranula, about the role of the toads and frogs in the medical culture, it is very specific and it suits to the title.
You just reminded me that there's a scene in Yosef Opatoshu's book, A Day in Regensburg, where there is a sort of snake oil salesman, if you will, that's, sort of from our modern American context, a healer, a purveyor of healing things, and he comes to town with an assortment of stones. In this case, I think Sternschieß,
Yeah.
which is a different kind of stone, and different people have different opinions on what it actually was. But again, it's the same kind of theory that the stone can perhaps remove a malady, or perhaps aid pregnancy, for example, or labor. But this idea of stones, especially, if the stone resembles an animal, as perhaps with a toad, they have this kind of power. I also want to go back to something you said, that frogs kind of figure in various ways, sort of allegorical, metaphorical, but also literal, right? That you said there might be an ointment made out of a frog, correct?
Yeah.
And this raises one of the many kind of sort of jarring aspects of this history, jarring for us as modern people, in that, many of these practices involve, first of all, things that seem quite cruel to animals, in various ways, and also things that are kind of horrifying, like consuming, burned pieces of animals, doing terrible things to animals, perhaps consuming their excrement. It's pretty gnarly. So, but can you just talk a little bit about, like, the ways that frogs might be used quite literally? Because I think it gives us a flavor of some of these practices.
So with those kind of dirty things that people sometimes applied as folk medicines, it's not exactly that they were they were used regular basis, or what people had temperature or was sneezing. It was sometimes they were used exactly to provoke vomiting. They were they were so connected with dirt, with they had all those negative implications that well, this medical tradition believed that it will be enough to use those kind of objects, even if they are already burned, and you really drink with wine only some remnants of it, that it will provoke vomiting, which is also important to regulate the level of humus in the body. So yeah, even the it is even the circumstances in which this frog is acquired are maybe important to give this particular animal some magical potency, because it's not enough to go outside of your home and find the frog on the like lying around on the courtyard. Sometimes you have to go in the middle of the night when the moon is full to exactly the place where frogs are usually found, or it is in this specific liminal space, like on the crossroads, and wait until the frog shows up just to catch it, and then you should bring it also without saying a word, to keep this magical potency untouched by civilization, and apply it also with special ingredients like water that was taken from a well at a specific time, and or taken from another place, from a river or from a lake. So yeah, it's not only it's not only about the animal itself. It's also about those other circumstances. And when we think about healing, well, maybe not with frogs, but with herbs, they seem to us very natural, and they were obviously. But on the other hand, this those other elements that usually add the real potency to the medicine are so important that we really cannot think about medical tradition without them, and try to find the reasoning what was the logic behind using those herbs and no others. But the problem is that those circumstances are usually not uh, you won't find them in the herbary books. You won't find it in old literature about plants. It's more like this woman knowledge, this tradition that is passed orally from generation to generation. So it's sometimes you really have to search through different kind of sources. For example, read people's memoirs about how this healing happened to them when they were children, to see that there were other elements of this procedure.
Okay, so you bring up a bunch of things which I want to hit on. First of all, that this topic of folk healing and medicine involves many different logics, I would say. And again, this is something that, is immediately apparent and that makes the topic so interesting, right? So you have this humoral logic, right? This theory, which I believe goes back to the Greeks, right? To Galen. So we're talking thousands of years, a continuity of the system of the humors, right? This idea that you have phlegm and bile and blood and cholera,
Black bile.
black
Yeah.
bile. Oh, right, black bile, yellow
Yeah.
bile, phlegm, blood, and that they have to be in balance, right? So why were
Yeah.
people always so, obsessed with bloodletting, right? Well, when you hear about bloodletting, you know that you're talking about a system or a logic, right, that goes back thousands of years. You're talking about this humoral system. Okay, then Mark also mentioned another kind of logic which is very important to Jewish folk healing, which surprises many people today, which is astrology, right? That, you mentioned that you can't just use a frog that happens to be sitting on your windowsill. It has to be, for example, the moon has to be full, or maybe the moon has to be new, whatever it is, that the timing, the heavenly timing, is crucial to the cure. And knowledge of the movement of the heavenly bodies is an important and an esteemed knowledge, right? Again, American Jews are often very surprised how much astrological knowledge is woven throughout uh, everyday Jewish life, or was. And that, in fact, you would even find astrological tables of various kinds within a machzor or some kind of a kolbo,
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
compendium. So we've got our humoral logic, we've got our astrological logic, we've got our sort of more universal logics of, well, this stone looks like a toad, so therefore it's got the powers of a toad, for example, right?
Yes. Yes. The similarity is extremely potent as a provocateur of our way of thinking. It links things that have no other physical or any connections, but in our minds they start to resemble each other and influence each other. So we sometimes use something instead of something else just because it looks.
So somebody posed a really great question, I think a very obvious question, which is that if we are using things like frogs, for example, and other ingredients in our medicines and things that are to be ingested, and these are clearly things that are not kosher, how did the Jewish folk understanding kind of deal with this contradiction? How are we integrating clearly trafe animals into our ingestibles, as we might say?
Yeah, so first of all, we have to understand that medicine as a separate system was absolutely accepted by the rabbis, at least in the post-Talmudic era. Even if the Talmud says that every good doctor will go to hell, it doesn't translate into what was really the relationship between doctors and the Jewish community, because every Jewish community, every Jewish town had to have this kind of practitioner, and it was also imposed on those communities by the religious law. So there was only one condition, of course, that those practitioners will heal people according to the laws of nature. They won't be witches and any kind of sorcerers, but exactly natural doctors. And by the natural doctors, rabbis usually meant those people who cured, who healed people on the basis of this early science that had its roots in Greco-Roman world, but also in the area of Mesopotamia when it comes to astrology and this part of tradition of the old world. So we know that applying medicines is important even from the religious point of view, and obviously not every medicine can be kosher. Uh, but in the case of health, it's not that important because when it comes to healing, when it comes to saving people's lives, kashrut is less an issue. It's not on the first page. People or doctors are not the specialists that should think about what kind of medicine should they apply and if it is in accordance with the religious law in case that there is this pikuach nefesh situation when they are saving lives. But when I've studied my sources, the sources from the Central and Eastern Europe, 19th century, in the 20th century, you still wouldn't find that much examples of medicines that would contradict the rules of kashrut very plainly. For example, yes, Jewish people were using fat that was not kosher, like uh, fat acquired from pigs, but they used it mostly for the usage on skin, for example, or to use it um, uh, as a soap or any kind of external application and not internal medical usage. However, this also happens sometimes, and you know how when you put borders of your culture that strictly, as rabbis usually did, you also provoke people to cross the barriers and to seek help on the other side, because this other side, even if it is presented as being not kosher or being demonist and being um, well, simply strange, it also mm, created this kind of image in usually it creates this kind of image in human minds that it is also very powerful in sense of magic. And yes, it is usually harmful because those others are usually the demons, the vampires that are endangering our being and the human settlements. But there are also some individuals among them that can come to help you in case of in case there is this health issue. So, yeah, I believe that kashrut itself is important. It is, we can see even in the remedy books that they try not to offer other Jewish readers, medicines that are based on non-kosher elements, but it doesn't mean that they do not exist. And the things like the frog that are being important to the Jewish culture from the surrounding come with everything they got. It's all the symbolic baggage is there, and it has. It's not important that it contradicts really the religious law. But to add to this, also we have to remember that the presence of those three logics in the in our sources, in the course, in the medical culture of Eastern European Jewry, was also possible because of the substantial backwardness of this part of Europe, mainly because since the 18th century, the Eastern Europe was in a permanent crisis. Since the Ukrainian uprising in the 17th century is the worst, that the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth fought against Swedes and Russians, it was always a crisis, and this crisis also uh, uh, reinforced those ideas about health and healing that already existed and couldn't they didn't weren't the people weren't able to acquire new knowledge that already appeared in Western Europe at the time. So it's we think about this old tradition that is thousands years old of astrology or humoral pathology, and it is true, it is 1,000 years old tradition. But when we think about Jewish ethnographers doing field work at the end of the 19th century and finding those kind of items, those kind of rational in the when they were speaking with people, we have to understand that those kind of theories only disappeared from universities in those lands 100 years earlier. It's only a matter of 2 or 3 generations that they cease to be part of the mainstream science or mainstream philosophy. And we understand that things of this kind do not disappear that easily from people's culture, that they are really passed on the descendants, and they imprint on the culture so strongly that even after several generations, you still talk about various things. We still do. We still speak about love as an emotion concentrating in our in middle of our chest. Although we know that it is a psychological emotion and it's usually located somewhere in the head.
Um, So, it's funny when you say that, about these ideas, both kind of, yes, they can be superseded, but also they persist. And, you can't help but, when you start to read your book or dive into the history of this kind of folk medicine, you see that it is, in fact, it feels very modern because on the one hand, we think of medicine as being like, people in white coats and science and, doctors in sterile labs. But if you shift that a little bit to wellness, in the wellness area, this stuff is all old news, right? Cupping,
Yeah.
bonkis, right? Like this is, you can't get more sort of old world than cupping and leeches, piavkes, right? In Yiddish and in Polish, piavkes, bankis. It's so funny when I go to Poland now, I'm always very proud, like of the 5 Polish words I know, piavkes, bankis, right? Like, how do I know? Why do I know the word for leeches and not bathroom? But because these things are important, and also, I have Polish friends and they're like, well, leeches, yeah, that's good, wellness wisdom. And it's not just Poland, it's LA. It's these things still have currency in a way that is so fascinating, but also speaks to their persistence in the very, very deep layers of our cultures.
Yeah, and it's so much present in our language on the everyday basis. And when we compare different languages from this European mosaic, it is even more obvious. For example, the very word for remedy or medicine in Polish is lek. So the word lek has exactly the same root as the word lich. It's something that brings the disease out of the body. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. So I want to talk a little bit because we have to talk about cultural exchange.
Yeah.
Cultural interchange is such an important theme in a book like this. And I'm always saying, when I teach, I always want to emphasize that cultural exchange and interchange, cultural contact goes both ways. I think you mentioned earlier, that you had, of course, Jews going to a rebbe, bringing kvitlach. You also had non-Jews going to rebbes, right? So there's not just this exchange of beliefs and practices among Jews and Christian Poles, but other peoples too, such as Tatars, who had a reputation as healers among Yiddish speakers, and you go into that quite a bit in your book. Can you talk a little bit about important areas where Jews and Christians shared health-related beliefs and practices, but also perhaps give us an example where they diverged significantly?
Yeah, it's obviously derives from the fact that Jewish people participated in the life of the medieval society or really modern society on just as other estates. It was a separate estate at the time. They were the separate estate. This is how defined by the majority of the society. And just as they participated in the wider economy of Eastern European lands, they also were part of the wider medical culture. And of course, that some of them were doctors and they were present at royal courts or at the courts of the magnates, but it's not really important. They were a margin because there were not so many doctors at all in Eastern Europe, mainly because those medical faculties in Polish universities were on uh, very low level and were quite terrible. They were still discussing Galen and Hippocrates, and most of the doctors were really, and Jewish and Christians alike, were really studying and at the universities in Padua and in Salerno, and sometimes even in Germany or in the Netherlands. Uh, but there were other practitioners, and when we think that about about cities as the centers of health practice, it is understandable that among the town dwellers we had also a substantial group of Jewish barbers or specialists, not exactly in healing, but in this basic surgeon thing, like a basic uh, um, uh, with dealing with what is happening on human skin, but also in applying bloodletting, leeches, and cupping. And there is still not much of a scholarship about this topic, but from what I've seen in the sources, Jewish barbers particularly were extremely valuable in the eyes of the Christian population, and I believe it was possible mainly because for Christians they were part of the same medical world, the same medical worldview. And if these practices were in fact based on the same tradition of Greek-Roman and then medieval and early modern medicine, it is understandable that there was no barrier, there was no psychological barrier, and people understood exactly what is the reasoning of this bleeding or leeches. But we can also take religion and see that, yes, it is true that Judaism was the most important binding agent for the Jewish community in the diaspora, that religion laid down the rules of daily life, but it also protected the diaspora from the influence from outside world. But the fact is that it was such a central component of the Jewish culture because exactly the extent of common common heritage this religion has with Muslims and Christians. And what's more, it's those are very important parts of heritage, the fundamental parts that are describing the origins of the world, the origins of the humankind, that translate into simple words the forces of elements, but also the forces that are invisible, the ghosts, the angels, and angelic beings, demons of any kind. And yes, it is true that when a peasant from somewhere in Eastern Europe would visit a tavern, and he or she um, had a need to philosophize a bit, they would probably not discuss Plato or Aristotle, but there was always this Jewish innkeeper with whom they could talk about Garden of Eden, about the original sin, about the flood and the Noah's Ark, about angels, about demonic beings. Yeah, and we also have to remember that this biblical text also is enriched by later exegesis that also shows various reasons why people before Noah's used to live that long, and why people had no experience of illness before this illness was sent to Jacob when he wanted to be warned before he will die and give the last advice to his sons. So this kind of additional exegesis, it can be acquired from literature, but you can also, or people used to learn about it from stories, from sermons they heard in church, but also in a tavern. And this Jewish tavern keeper was also an intermediary of this kind of knowledge. And it's not only that he was an intermediary of a knowledge, but he could also be a practitioner, because in a tavern there was usually tea, there was usually mint or other kind of infusions. Probably there was also a tavern keeper's wife that was trained by her family in this basic of nursing. Um, so if you think about tavern somewhere in the middle of East European countryside as a center of culture where people organized weddings, where people used to spend their free time in Sundays during the mass, it's obvious that this tavern keeper was an important person for spreading knowledge about health and healing, and some ideas and some myths, and vice versa. This person was also hearing what was popular among those people in the villages, and Jews living in the villages usually knew the local language quite well. It was extremely important to
Sure.
be able to speak with the clients. This was also the transmission, the path of transmission of various ideas from this popular culture in the villages that was predominantly Christian into Jewish sources that we later find. And sometimes we find, and it's quite often that we find a handwritten a manuscript that is devoted to health and has various prescriptions, and they are sometimes taken from old Kabbalistic texts, and sometimes it's more modern medicine. But usually, like 5 to 10% of the content is written in the local Slavic dialect. It's not always written in a Slavic, in Latin or Cyrillic letters, but um, sometimes even it's a Slavic text. It's written with Hebrew letters with the kudot to be able to read it. And you can also see that those texts, either they are natural or magical, uh, they they taking root in this culture. They are being part of not only of interactions between Jews and non-Jews, but also part of this treasury of health ideas about health and healing among Ashkenazi Jewry.
So basically, what you're saying is that the Yiddish tavern keeper in Poland and his wife were the original health influencers.
Yeah, sure.
And I think, I mean, I'm being a little bit cheeky, but I think it's very true that it's not that difficult to analogize to the way, that there is this whole parallel system of alternative health and influencers, and the way that that knowledge is disseminated and created really does harken back to this earlier period of more informal medical advice and healing. We're running out of time, so I want to get to some of these questions. Um, Now, this is a great question. I think that, everybody comes to. Michelle asks, are there any Eastern European Ashkenazi folk remedies that we now know to have scientific basis? Do any of them work?
Oh, this is not exactly what I studied. I had to take caution and distance to my
This is
sources
not medical
because
advice.
yes, because yeah, I believe in modern medicine. It's not perfect, but it still helped us prolong our lives and change our attitude to even how we react to epidemics and how we do not believe in epidemics anymore. Uh, yeah, so yeah, but I also uh, believe that not everything that was part of this common knowledge was just a matter of some tradition. There wasn't experimenting, but people tried those prescriptions, those medicines, and even if you don't gather herbs in the middle of the night, at the beginning of the moon, or on the full moon, it still has some attributes that can affect your body. For example, it can help you get rid of toxins. So yeah, there are obviously some elements of it that work. What I would not recommend is, for example, organizing weddings on the cemeteries in case of epidemic, which also happened during the recent pandemic in various places where this ultra-Orthodox communities live.
Yeah, so Mark is referring to the Schwarze Chasana, the Black Wedding, or the Schwarze Chuppah, which evolved or came about basically in the modern period with the arrival of cholera to Europe, or specifically to Eastern Europe, and is a really fascinating and quite deep subject, which you touch on quite a bit. Um, all right, we've got very little time left. Let's see. Peter asks, does the comparative approach help to understand the mechanisms of the healing power of Jewish folk medicine? For example, comparing with Chinese or Tibetan traditional medicine.
Well, again, it's difficult to discuss its healing power, really. But obviously, comparison was absolutely fundamental for me. especially in the context of Central and Eastern Europe. It is almost impossible to discuss Jewish sources without taking into account how much was also gathered among Germans or Slavic people from this region, and how much it resembles the same ideas, and sometimes we have even the same the same magical formulas, the same magical incantations that are only translated in other languages, but are the same symbolics, the same formulas at the beginning and at the end appear in them. So, and even if they are in different languages, they still address the same passages from the Bible, the same protagonists of the Bible. So, in this sense, it is obviously very important to study the sources in the comparative way. But okay, let me just add in the context of Far Eastern influences that obviously are not that visible, and we know about Tatar influences that are very vague, that are visible because of those folk healers were usually called Tatars, but also because of the introduction of some herbs and plants to Eastern Europe only with the Tatar invasion in the Middle Ages, and they were also used in healing practices. Maybe there are also some other influences that not exactly from China or the Tibet, but from Persia, for example, with some books that were later translated into Hebrew and also circulated already in the Middle Ages in Europe. But that's it. If it was more or less powerful, it is hard to say.
All right. Well, it's exactly, excuse me. I was just thinking, we say a frog in the throat, and I just had a frog in my throat. Speak of the devil. It's exactly 2 o'clock now. It's 2:01, so I know we need to wrap it up. And I apologize we are not able to get to the rest of your questions. This is such a huge topic, and Mark's book is so dense. And, you could spend a year just reading it and, looking at the citations, and there is so much information. Um, Margot writes, I'm disappointed you didn't go into curing herbs that were used. Again, a huge subject. You got to get Mark's book, also the book Ashkenazi Herbalism, and there's going to be a sequel to Ashkenazi Herbalism, which is coming out very soon. I highly recommend that book also, by Deandra Cohen and Adam Siegel. I could talk to you, Mark, for 3 hours. This is such an incredible topic. Thank you so much to everybody who came today. Sorry, there's so much more to get to we didn't get to, but maybe there will be future opportunities. And I know, Mark, you're in the United States for the rest of the semester, the school year, excuse me. So perhaps you'll be giving other talks too. In fact, I'm sure you will be. Check the Cat Center website for that, where he's a fellow now.